The African economy has been experiencing an upheaval, and the constraints have been unrelenting. When the country ushered in a new dispensation, the growth levels were once at around 5%, but in recent years at one stage reached a 0% growth rate in 2017. The GDP figures that came out at the beginning of this month showed the economy was not performing well at minus 2.2%. Where is the country getting it wrong? As we are in the new dawn, will President Cyril Ramaphosa, together with business and labor, be able to turn the economy around? Perhaps the role of business should be scrutinized and see if the voice of organized business formations is heard and be able to adapt and influence the economic landscape in the country. Can we also question the status quo and ask whether capitalism is good or bad for this country? Professor Raymond Parson has just released his new book, Good Capitalism, Bad Capitalism, the Role of Business in South Africa. Earlier, I spoke to him and asked him what is his argument about this matter.
The overall message in the book, which I think concerns all of us, is we want a bigger, stronger and a better economy in South Africa. And the role of business and of capitalism is quite important. And so what the message of the book says, that unless we maximize the role of the private sector in various ways, we're not going to get the good things that we want. Now that falls into several parts. Obviously, as I say in the book, that the margin between good capitalism and bad capitalism can often be very small. For example, if you wear a halo, it only has to drop a few centimeters to become a noose. That's bad capitalism. And that's why you need rules. Even the capitalist system, like democracy, needs rules. So what we need to understand, and that is really what I try to convey in the book, is that if you have a strong and accountable democracy, it has got to go hand in hand with a dynamic and accountable private sector, which we call capitalism. And that is why we need to make sure that the system does produce the goods and the services, the jobs and the investment that we want.
But the problem is goods can be produced, jobs can be created, not at the rate that we expect because we still have high unemployment levels. So people are bemoaning capitalism, whether it's good or bad, because they have a sense that the people who are policymakers, people who are economists and who are in government are talking right, but they are talking left, but they are walking right. And this makes capitalism to be mean, exclusionary, and it leads to high levels of inequality in the society because it promulgates competition and maximizes the profits of the private sector. But then the profits are not plowed back into the society. They pack up and go with their money. What do you say about that?
These are the challenges that you face with any system. Now, when we talk about democracy, it has its flaws. Obviously, things go wrong in democracy, as we've seen in South Africa. But you don't then say, well, that we want a dictatorship. You say, well, how do we put this right? How do we make the system work better? Now, the same with the capitalist system. Yes, there are things that have gone wrong, but we must be careful not to be trapped into these isms too much, like, for example, capitalism, socialism, communism. The ism I believe in, which I think South Africa needs to follow, is pragmatism. That's what we need. In other words,
the issue of policy making, Professor, is a problem. When you look at the policies in South Africa, that sounded very good. They were like music to the ears of the masses, and they were saying Viva. When you're talking about RDP, you're talking about GE, Asgisa, you're talking NDP now. But when you look at the glorified talk of policy making, it doesn't resonate with what we see when you fly out of the OR Tambo and you look down, you see shacks, you see that people are living in poverty. So these policies are not talking to the real economic development of the masses.
And I'm glad you've raised that, because what the book does is look back, so why has this happened? Why have we so many plans and projects and seminars and summits, and yet we have all this disappointment? We still have high unemployment, we have a low growth trap, and one of the messages of the book is we have not implemented what we've said. We're good at the rhetoric, we're bad at the reality of implementation. Now, that applies very much to the government, but it also applies to the sort of relationship between government and the private sector to help make things happen.
You are putting the blame on the door of the private business and the business formations that their voice has not been loud enough, and secondly, they've just been passengers in policy formulation without them taking their stance and say, this is our suggestion in terms of where we want the economy to go.
That's one of the most important points. That's one of the important weaknesses that I've identified in the book, that in fact, although the private sector in its corporate, whether it's a street hawker or a small business, particularly a small business or the big corporation, there are decisions they have to take in their own interests. But the broader issue, do we have a strong and unified voice for business that can make a difference at the policy level, help to reduce the uncertainty in the policy environment, which is causing so much negative attitudes among investors and so forth? So that, I think, is one of the big challenges of our new president and his team, is to rebuild the trust and the cooperation in such a way that together between government and the private sector we can find solutions, like we're doing with the state-owned enterprises, that I think we must do with indeed our national health insurance. We're not going to get the right scheme unless there's cooperation between the government and the private sector, taking the best out of both and making it work for the people who are unemployed, who are impoverished and are looking for a better future.
Your parting shot, can the Humpty Dumpty of business be put all together?
I think organized business must cease to be a cacophony of acronyms, which it is at the moment, all doing something, but the total is less than the sum of the parts, and we need a more unified voice in business, not only for the sake of business, but also to take better decisions that will address growth, unemployment, and all those things that we have promised many people over many years.
Professor Raymond Parson on his new book, Good Capitalism, Bad Capitalism, the role of business in South Africa. And of course, we now check what's happening in the markets.